The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone. Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace.
When I was starting out in ministry, I was a pastor in a church that had several pastors. I was just one of many associate pastors. And we read a book together called Lincoln on Leadership. It was all about leadership lessons from the life of Abraham Lincoln. And for the last meeting that we had about that book, we walked into the room, and standing in the room was Abraham Lincoln. Full-on guy, 6'4", stove pipe hat, the whole thing. We were like, what is going on? Somebody had hired a Lincoln impersonator who traveled all over Illinois and did educational lessons to schools. And this guy's really, really good. He had a one-act thing that he would do. He had all kinds of stuff. And the whole point was we were going to sit with him and get to ask him questions and talk to him. And it was really fun at first because it was like, okay, so did Lincoln believe? He'd be like, oh, sorry, Mr. President, did you believe that? So we were supposed to talk to him like he was Lincoln, right? And this was really fun for a little while. And then it got strange. It was strange on did you, yeah, boy, he got shot. Should we talk about that? I don't know if we should talk about that. And then he would try to say something and he would be like, well, in your day, I believe you call them automobiles. And it was funny the first time he did it. It wasn't funny the ninth time he did it. Because there's this, we're crossing time and it's not really the person and it's just all kinds of awkward and difficult. And that is the feeling that many of us get reading the Bible. That it's hard to access, it's hard to know, it's hard to am I supposed to be reading this as though I'm there or later on looking back on it, or what is the time frame and what is happening? And so we're going to do our best to navigate that together. So let's start here. When we talk about Israel, when we say Israel in the Bible, what we're talking about, let me show you what we're talking about. We're talking about the 12 tribes of Israel that have gathered by the time they make it into the promised land, this is what they look like. All these colors are different tribes. Now, all I really want to point out, when they found out I was going to be doing this, they asked if I wanted a laser pointer. And I was like, I don't know if I need one, but who doesn't say yes to a laser pointer? Everybody wants a laser pointer. All right, so what I want to point out is 10 tribes are gathered here. This is 2 tribes, so whatever this color is, orangey kind of color, is Judah. They're large. And right in the middle of Judah, landlocked there with nowhere to go, is Nebraska. No, it's not. It's Simeon. Simeon is right in the middle of the Judahites, kind of surrounded on every side there. So this is what it looks like. And they're supposed to live like this in peace and harmony and all will be well. But that's not what happens. And they disobey the Lord. And so they end up as a divided nation. So here's what it looks like as a divided nation. And what you see in the green is Judah. And Israel, by the time of Isaiah, is much larger. They've taken over landmass. Judah has the temple. They have a succession of good, God-honoring kings. Israel doesn't have either of those things. They never have a king that follows Yahweh. And so Israel has chosen a different path. Now, also by the time of Isaiah, here's what the map looks like kind of around Israel and Judah. So there's Israel, there's Judah. What I want to point out is this little thing right here, Aram of Damascus, because that's going to feature into Isaiah. But you've got Egypt way down here. You've got all of these other countries that are surrounding Judah. They are hemmed in on every side, much like they are today, if you look at a map today. So Aram and Israel asked Judah to ally against another country. So Aram, Israel, they're together, they're bros, they come together, and they're like, hey, Judah, help us. There's this huge country called Assyria, and they're wiping everybody out. Would you help us? And Judah's like, nope, not interested. Why would we go to war about, they're not at our door, we don't care. Oh, sorry, we should have asked differently. What we mean is if you don't help us, we're going to wipe you out. So forget about the fact that, they used to be married, like Israel and Judah, they now are going to go to war together. And so, but remember who Judah is. I mean, they're the line of the kings of Israel come out of Judah. Jerusalem is there. They call on Yahweh. They love Yahweh. Yahweh rescues them. So, of course, when Israel and Aram come and are like, we're going to beat you up, Judah runs right into the arms of Assyria. They skip Yahweh altogether. They don't ask for his help. And they say, you know what we should do? I mean, the country that these guys are worried about, we'll go to them. We'll send envoys to them. And we'll ask them for help. And we'll say, did you know what Israel and Aram are planning? We didn't want any part of it, so why don't you come and, wipe these guys out? So Aram and Israel, this is going to work. This little ploy that Judah makes, this is going to work. This is God's response to Judah through the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 8, second half of verse 4. The wealth of Damascus, that's that country of Aram, and the spoils of Samaria, that's Israel, will be carried off to the king of Assyria. Okay, so it works. Whoa, that's great. Woo, that was close. I mean, they could have been wiped out by Israel and Aram, but they weren't. Judah was saved, so that's good news, right? But yeah, Assyria's help is going to come at a cost. Verse 6 of chapter 8. Because these people rejected the slowly flowing waters of Shiloah, that's the way Yahweh does things, and they rejoiced with Rezin, that's Aram, and the sons of Remaliah, that's Israel. That is, they rejoiced in their downfall. The Lord will certainly bring against them the mighty rushing water of the Euphrates River. Now he's speaking poetically. The king of Assyria and all of his glory. It will overflow its channels and it will spill over its banks. It will pour not just into Israel and Aram, into Judah. It'll flood over it and sweep through, reaching up to the neck. And its flooded banks will fill your entire land. Emmanuel. Band together, peoples, and be broken. Pay attention, all you distant lands. Prepare for war and be broken. Prepare for war and be broken. Let me show you why Israel, Aram, and Judah are afraid of Assyria. I'll show you the next map. All of this yellow, that's Assyria. There's little tiny Judah. And they're coming. Oh, sure, we'll rescue you, but then we're going to want your land too, and we're going to want to carry you off as slaves. Isaiah saw this. Isaiah foresaw both Assyria's help and the eventual attack of Judah. But he also saw that the attack would fail. Remember, the water would not go over their heads. It would go up to their necks. They would be saved, but like barely. And Yahweh would rescue Judah despite them not asking him to and despite their unfaithfulness to him. So that sets the frame for Isaiah chapter 9. Isaiah chapter 9, starting in verse 1. Nevertheless, the gloom of the distressed land will not be like that of the former times when he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, that is Israel. He humbled them with Assyria. But in the future, he'll bring honor to the way of the sea, to the land of the east of the Jordan, and to the Galilee of nations. Those three phrases are phrases to describe Judah. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A light has dawned on those living in the land of darkness. You've enlarged the nation and increased its joy. The people have rejoiced before you as they rejoice at harvest time and as they rejoice when dividing spoils. Okay, hang on a second. There's this huge invading horde coming from Assyria, and people are rejoicing. How is that even possible? Because what Isaiah sees is the end result. Verse 4. For you have shattered the oppressive yoke and the rod on their shoulders, the staff of their oppressor, just as you did on the day of Midian. It's a famous battle in Israel's history. For every trampling boot of battle and the bloodied garments of war will be burned as fuel for the fire. And eventually Assyria departs Judah, and all that's left are huge bonfires of all of their stuff. Israel and Aram will not defeat Judah, but even Assyria themselves will be defeated. And here's how it will be accomplished. Verse 6. This is what we know. This is the passage that we are most familiar with. For a child will be born for us, a son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. The dominion will be vast. Its prosperity will never end. He'll reign on the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish and sustain it with justice and righteousness from now on and forever. And the zeal of Yahweh of armies will accomplish this. Okay, we read that, and especially at this time of year, and if we've been in church longer than 10 minutes, our mind goes immediately to, oh, this is talking about Jesus. But remember everything we just read. Jesus is not going to be born for 600 years. How in the world does that have anything to do with the advancing Assyrian army? How is Jesus going to defeat an army he hasn't been born yet? Well, what Isaiah is saying, how they would have read this, is that a king will be born from the royal line who is going to do this. So he will have a vast kingdom with all kinds of success. He'll be just and righteous as a ruler. His kingdom will go on and on. God will be the one behind it all. This is not Jesus in this moment. Because God is not mean or cruel. God doesn't say, oh, I'm sorry, you have this advancing army. 600 years from now, it's going to be great. You guys are out of luck. He doesn't do that. My friend Jason was a paver of huge roads, like interstates and whatever. And one day I'm driving down an interstate that Jason actually paved with his crew, and he worked for this large company. And I look up, and there's Jason on a billboard, his face looking down at me while I'm driving. He's like, 40 feet high and 20 feet wide, and like, oh my goodness, Jason's on a billboard, and it's advertising the paving company. And it's basically like, hey, Jason paved this road, which he did. And we can do this kind of work for you. It's that kind of thing. So I called Jason. I'm like, hey man, I just was driving down such and such a road, and he's like, oh yeah, I was hoping nobody would notice. Buddy, it's a billboard. That's literally the point, is that everybody notices. So Jason's on a billboard, but when I called him, I didn't stop at the billboard to talk to him, because he's not really the billboard. It's just a picture of him. And if I wanted to reach that company, I didn't drive to the billboard to talk to the billboard. The company had a headquarters somewhere else. It's just representational. And we all understand how that works. None of the four names that we read, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace, none of those four are the person's everyday name. In Isaiah chapter 7, we learn that one will be born called Emmanuel. And we understand that Emmanuel, God with us, is going to be a name for Jesus. Do we have any indication that anybody called him Emmanuel? No, his name was Jesus. Nobody was like, hey, Manny, come over here and play soccer with us. That's not how it worked. What was that then? Why say that he's going to have this name if he didn't really actually have that name? Well, this is the same idea. The person is a sign and a guarantee, a representative of what the name says. Isaiah says that there's going to be a king born who will be a walking billboard for the one who commissioned the billboard, and he will be used to defeat Assyria. And this king's job is going to be to live worthy of the name that he bears. And so when we think about this, we have to call a timeout in our world for just a second and ask the question, what does our billboard say? Like if you bear the name of Christ in you, if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, what are you advertising for him? What is it that you put out there? If you're the only Christian somebody knows, what does your life say about who God actually is? What kind of advertisement are you? So what are the Isaiah 9 names supposed to convey? Now, we read these in our world, and we're treating them in our world as 4 separate names. In actuality, when you read this in Hebrew, it's a sentence. So it says that this one who will be born will be called, and then it's a sentence, not individual things. And the sentence is loosely translated. The divine warrior, a supernatural planner, the sovereign of time, a prince of peace. That's what his name will be. It's a long name, right? So he's representing something. Last week, Pastor David talked about the idea of wonderful counselor. The king will be a supernatural planner. He will make these incredible plans, almost like he can see around corners. This week, mighty God. The king will have power and authority to carry those plans into existence. You and I, we make plans all the time. We don't have full and complete power and authority to make them happen. We can plan not to pay income tax. Sounds like a pretty good plan to us. Yeah, somebody else has more power than we do in that endeavor. Next week, we'll talk about the eternal Father. The king will have an everlasting kingdom, and it will be a kingdom like a father nurturing his children. And then the Prince of Peace. The king will lead a kingdom that is at rest. So this week, mighty God. The king will have power to accomplish all of the plans that he makes. Whenever we talk about Isaiah, whenever we talk about anything having to do with prophets, things get strange quickly. And so we need to talk about prophecy for just a moment. I can't tell you all the different kinds of prophets and all the different kinds of prophecy there are. I want to give you just some guidance and direction. So here's the first thing. When we think of a prophet, when I say this person's a prophet, what comes into your mind? Well, it's probably somebody like, I see a vision, you're in a field, it's a field of flowers, and there's an elephant in that field. And okay, that's someone who's like looking at your life or looking into the future somehow. In actuality, in the Bible, that's like a tiny little portion of what prophets did. The prophet's main job was to deliver God's direction to people in their time. The prophets were people who said, hey, we know the Mosaic law, we know all the things we're supposed to be doing. How are we doing with that? I don't think we're doing very well. I'm going to call us back to obedience. This is what's there. We know the law. Let's follow the law. And if you don't follow the law, bad things are going to happen because that's what God told us. And so it's kind of like this. Because you are not worshiping Yahweh alone, you're enduring this suffering. It doesn't take anything supernatural to say that. It's just what everything that God has always said to his people. And the prophet's job is to remind people of that. That's 90% of what the prophets did. But there are other prophets, some of the prophets, had the supernatural ability to see other things. Isaiah is one of them, on occasion. God's foretelling to people with future fulfillment. And that fulfillment could be like right away, near, or it could be far. Daniel is a prophet. He has a vision. He said, this is going to happen. And hours later, it happens. Babylon is completely conquered by Persia. He said, this is going to happen because you're being a bad king, and that's what happens. Sometimes this is going to happen, but it's going to be delayed. Actually, in Isaiah's time, Isaiah makes a prophecy like that. Because you're obedient, this is not going to happen in your time. It's going to happen later. So there's a fulfillment to that, but it's very specific. It's not just, hey, stop being naughty or bad things are going to happen. It's something like this. Because you refuse to worship Yahweh alone, specifically, an army will surround you that is mighty, but a king will arise who will save you, so you have peace for a time. There's also one other kind of prophecy, and that's God's foretelling to people with multiple fulfillments. So there's a near fulfillment and a far fulfillment. And it looks like this. Because you refuse to worship Yahweh alone, an army will surround you, and a king will arise who will save you. And someday, a great king will save all people in the way that you have been saved. And there will be peace forever. That's the further fulfillment. So in his mind's eye, Isaiah can see the Assyrian army turning tail and going the other way. This is a prophet of God speaking for God about what God is going to bring about. It's not general, it's not generic, it's very specific. For Judah, they've experienced darkness and defeat and oppression. The birth of a new son into the royal household is incredible news. It's a sign of hope. This child's birth is a sign that God is going to restore his people. This is literal, physical king of Judah being born from the royal line. Who's the king? Who's he talking about? Well, on one hand, the provision of this king is going to be a reminder, a walking billboard, remember, of God's ability to accomplish whatever he wants because he's a mighty God. There are two specific kings that are born in the days after this that this could be referring to. The most likely is Hezekiah. Isaiah is one of the prophets that prophesies for Hezekiah. Another one is I think it's his grandson, maybe great-grandson, Josiah. They are mighty men of God. They're wonderful kings who turn the nation back to God. They are reformers who restore people back to Yahweh, restore worship in the temple. And as a result, God smiles on them and on the kingdom, and they have peace on every side. God fights for them. All is well. But while Yahweh rescued Judah from enemies in the near term, it doesn't last long. Hezekiah is going to be the king when Assyria comes in, and God does indeed rescue them. But, 150 years later, Babylon comes to town and carries them off into captivity. And we see that, and we say, well, how much of a supernatural planner, divine warrior, peacemaker can he be if the solution that was proposed only lasted like 150 years? At least some of the people who are hearing Isaiah prophesy this in his day, in his time, they understand that Isaiah is prophesying with that idea of near fulfillment and far fulfillment in mind, that it's a both and. This is why Jesus had these conversations a lot with people. Sometimes it says that Jesus unpacked for people that the one who's born, the Messiah, has to die, and what the prophets had to say about the Messiah. He would turn them to passages like this, and he would explain it to them. Because there's a near fulfillment of this, the rescuing of Judah, and there's a further fulfillment. Matthew, Luke, John all quote Isaiah 9 when they're referring to Jesus. Because he's born in the royal line as a son of David. You can trace him directly. That's why Matthew starts with a genealogy of Jesus. Who is this guy? Well, here he is. He is worthy of the name divine warrior, a supernatural planner, the sovereign of time, a prince of peace. The arrival of Christ is further confirmation that the plan God put in place is being carried out by God. So, okay, thanks, Steve. This is fascinating stuff. Thanks for the TED Talk. What does this do for me? Why does this matter? I was in ministry for a little while, then I left ministry, went into the marketplace for a while, and I was done. I was not going to be a pastor. I didn't believe that God wanted me to be a pastor anymore. And in like 2005, some friends came to me and said, we believe God is calling you back into ministry. What is the next step for you? And I said, well, I kind of skipped seminary. I really need to go to seminary, but there's no way. I mean, I'd like make good money, and I'm paying our bills, and we got little kids, and no, we believe God is doing this. And over time, as we prayed about it, we began to believe the same thing, that God was calling us to that, and it made no sense. You can't just say, oh, we're just going to do this. We have like a mortgage. We have little kids. How are we going to do this? And over the next several months, things started falling into place. God had put on Kathy's heart, my wife's heart, to go get a realtor license. And so she became a realtor. And so she started doing that and working that way. And I left my job entirely. I treated seminary like a full-time job. And over the year and a half that we were in seminary, money showed up. We look at each other to this day and say, I don't know how God did it. Money showed up. We got checks in the mail on several occasions that were to the penny for a bill that we needed to pay that we don't know where it came from. There were times we got things like from an account that was supposedly closed. I go, I don't remember. Do you remember having an account? No, I don't remember having that account. I wonder if this is like a real thing or what is this? We had like insurance settlement, something that we never joined. Like, well, by the way, you were part of this and here's your money for that. Okay. We had a furnace go out at one point. We had paid $75 for them to come and clean our furnace. It was like $5,000 to us back then. And it said, we're going to pay $75 to get the furnace cleaned. And they came and they did it and they cleaned it. And it came with a 1-year warranty that if anything on the furnace broke, after they had been there and inspected it, they would replace it. 11 months later, the motor went on the furnace, literally the most expensive part. And they came in with a brand new motor and they put it in. They replaced it. We got like a brand new furnace out of that. It was all of these stuff. We had a list of them at one point in this book of all the things God was doing in just a year and a half. And I tell you that to tell you that that was God's plan. And we had a choice to say either, well, I don't know, I can't figure out how it's going to work. So because I don't know how it's going to work, I'm just not going to do it. Or I can believe that God is not only a supernatural planner, but that he has the power and the might to actually accomplish what he says he's going to accomplish. We're, most of us, okay believing that God is a good planner. Well, of course he is. But where we run into problems is when it comes to saying, and I put my faith in that plan. And I believe that he is powerful enough to make it happen. Well, the appearance of Jesus is the billboard. It is the sign that it will be done as exactly as God said it would be done because he said it. The salvation prophesied for Judah by Isaiah was accomplished, and it lasted for a little while. But the salvation that Christ accomplished for us on the cross, that lasts for eternity. This is why the angel's message, when they sing to the shepherds and announce the birth of Christ, today a Savior has been born. He is Christ the Lord. This is good news of great joy for all the people. Not for you Judahites, not for Israel, not for the Middle East. For all people, for everybody. Because now the peace has been extended to all. Now, what separates us from God is not an invading army. What separates us from God is sin. Jesus paid the penalty for sin on the cross for us so that we can be in right relationship with God. That was God's plan from the moment we rebelled against him in the garden. What's left for us is, do we have belief in that? Because we look around the world and we say, well, wait a second, the Prince of Peace has arrived. Do we have peace? Look at our world. Our world is kind of a mess. We don't have righteousness and peace on this earth forever. No, we don't right now. Christ brought peace between men and God, between human beings and God, but not everyone takes him up on that. It's an optional deal. And this world is still broken. If we remember what Isaiah is going through, we remember what actually happens. One of the things that we remember is that Hezekiah or Josiah, whoever it was that is being talked about here, was not the full and eternal fulfillment of the prophecy either. There's still more of the prophecy to come, an eternal kingdom. Here's what's exciting about that. We're in the middle of it. What Isaiah said 600 years before Jesus, we haven't seen the final fulfillment of. We're still yet to experience that. So here's the lesson for our lives. There's faith required to believe that God is mighty. Jesus told us to have faith in his power. And he said to be still. And he said you don't have to be afraid. And we're told to cast our cares on him because he cares for us. And yet we have a hard time with that. We have to believe that Jesus is capable of doing what he says he's going to do because he is the plan that God had from the beginning. When Judah stopped believing that God was mighty, they lost their motivation to turn to him. They started turning to other places to try to be saved. Assyria is too big for anybody to handle. What problem is too big for God to handle in your life? Which one is just too big? Which one is just overwhelming right now? Where is he not mighty enough? Where are you turning to your own solutions, to circumstances beyond your control? Some of us are struggling to believe something. We're struggling to believe that Jesus can actually do anything. Maybe Jesus was just a historical figure and little relevance other than a legacy of really good teaching, but everything Isaiah said, everything, has come true. Everything. He was absolutely clear that Jesus would not be just a man, but a mighty God. All of God's plans come to fruition. Do you believe that? Let's go to prayer together. And as we go to prayer, let's pause for a moment to consider where it is in our lives we're allowing some huge obstacle to stand in the way of God. God has a plan, supernatural. He's mighty. He can do whatever it is he sets out to do. But this health crisis seems really big. This financial thing seems really big. This relational rift seems really big. But if God is a supernatural planner, then he is also a mighty one. And we believe that. And so right now, let's just do this. Let's just take a moment and hold back out to God that thing that we've been holding on to for ourselves. Because we've been trying to solve our own problems. There's probably something in particular that we've been trying to solve, and it's time to just hand it to him. Just hand it to him. God, I can't do this. I can't solve this. You're the supernatural planner. You're the one who is mighty. Would you just handle it for me? It's your plan anyway. God, in all of this, we trust you. This is hard for us to understand. It's hard for us to get our arms around. But we believe in this moment, we choose to believe that you are mighty enough, so increase our faith. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. We're going to go to a time of communion. And when we do that, if you're here and you're a follower of Christ, feel free to take part with us, whether you're here visiting from another church or not. But if you're here and you're not sure if you're a Christ follower, or you know you're not, would you just let the elements pass you by? And as they come by, take the bread, take the cup, hold on to them, and we'll take them together in just a few moments.